Anchors of War, Chapter 1. January 23, 29:04:10 p.m. Sole Confederation Navy ship Mars in orbit of Severus. James Hackett rolled out of his bed aboard Mars and began dressing, before he even fully realized why he had woken. Groggily, he checked the alert. Possible hostile fleet inbound to Hannah's World. What the hell, he thought. As he finished putting on his uniform, he wondered why the hell anybody would attack or send a fleet to Hannah's World. Nobody had a reason to do anything like that. In fact, nobody else even boarded that system, or even that sector. The only power that might want to antagonize the Confederation by attacking or making a show of force at one of the colonies under its protection would be the Republic of New Asia. But they boarded the opposite side of Confederation space. There was no way for them to have gotten a fleet there. Grabbing his personal comms unit, he alerted the captain of Mars to meet him in the ship's conference room. He jogged up to the conference room, still fit at a sprightly 107 years old. He had the regeneration therapies to thank for that, he supposed. He had the outward look of a dignified man of middle age with short white hair and a thin beard. But under that facade was the body of a fit 20-something. Nobody stopped to salute him as he jogged along. It was clear he was in a hurry, and he wouldn't have replied. Finally nearing the conference room, he slowed down to a walking pace. The woman in the room stood at attention when he entered the room. "At ease, give me the situation," said Hackett as he sat, and the other officer followed suit. "All right, sir." The Hannah Star AA net detected a large fleet en route to the system from one of the grav lanes opposite to us, said Captain Samantha Forrester. That much was already evident. Hannah Star only had 3 grav lanes, one to Severus, and to leading into supposedly uninhabited space. They don't have an FDL relay that side of the system, so they have no way to contact the incoming fleet. Our projections say that fleet probably slightly outmasses our own Severus sector fleet, but we have no idea what their allegiance is or what their combat capabilities are. We only have 2 hours before they arrive at the system edge. Before you ask, Hannah's World got this information 4 hours ago, but spent those 4 hours debating whether or not to call us, said Captain Forrester. They shouldn't have waited so long, Hackett said, frowning. Captain Forrester nodded in agreement. Those 4 hours could very easily be the difference between life and death for a lot of people, if this went the way they thought it would. Sure, it would take the fleet 10 days to travel the 10 light-year distance between Severus and Hannah Star, but it could still mean more lives lost. So, to recap, we have no idea who they are or what they want, but they're coming from somewhere where we think nobody lives. Their tonnage is slightly higher than this fleet's, and they are likely either attacking or making a show of force at a colony almost nobody cares about, Hackett said, rubbing his short beard. This was not good, and he'd prefer not to rush into an encounter with the unidentified fleet. But he didn't have a choice. Hannah's World was his responsibility to defend. That's about right, James, said Captain Forrester, grimacing. She knew that the situation was definitely far from ideal. All right, get everyone moving and set up a fleet conference. Looks like we're taking a trip to Hannah's World. January 24th, 29:04:12:05 a.m. Hannah's World Station. Unidentified contact has dropped anchor on the system edge, shouted the nervous sensor technician. Michael jumped slightly in his seat. He had been napping. It was past midnight, after all. Unfortunately, it was entirely possible that was the last time he would sleep. Ever. All right, what have we got? Don't forget to set up a real-time transmission to the sector fleet as we go. I don't want them to get here blind, Michael said, hopefully sounding much calmer than he felt. We've got. The sensor technician's eyes widened and his face paled, gulping. He tried to finish his sentence. We've got 5 super dreadnoughts and 10 dreadnoughts, he said, his voice shaking as he pronounced the death sentence of the station's crew. That was nearly the same number of heavy capital ships as the sector fleet, and it was overkill to send even a single battle cruiser to kill the station, to say nothing of super dreadnoughts. Still stuttering slightly, the technician tried to finish. There are also 20 battleships here and 30 battle cruisers. Jesus fucking Christ, there are so many. What the hell do we do? The sensor tech said, his voice wavering and sounding very scared. Michael thought he heard at least one person in the room sobbing, and someone else was murmuring into a comm unit, something akin to outright panic in her voice. "Put them on the holo," Michael said, his voice dejected. They were doomed. As the technician put representations of the probably hostile fleet on the holo tank, he looked at it. The ships were blocky. They seemed like something a kid would build out of Lego. That didn't make them any less dangerous though. The shitty computer his station was already tentatively identifying probably weapon ports and mounts, hangars, and ... windows. That couldn't be right. No warship would have windows. ... Everybody knew that. The computer must be malfunctioning. The computer also couldn't identify the insignia of the ship, nor did it have any idea where it came from. He buried his face in his hands. "We airfucked. Year 509684, month 5, day 15. 13 o'clock Galactic Standard Time, aboard Disecri Dominion Superdreadnought, Everlasting Bloodlust." As the 4th Expansion Fleet entered the system, Fleet Leader Queequeg smiled. A new world to conquer that nobody else knew about. Not only that, but it was an independent colony, which meant it must have come from somewhere, and he would conquer that somewhere as well. There was glorious and honorable battle to come. ... He could feel it. On top of that, if he took the developed homeworld of a species, he would be set up for life, and he could retire and begin searching for life mates. He waited impatiently as Pud directed his bridge crew and began readying combat preparations. Two unidentified ships, likely freighters, are fleeing to the grav lane on the other side of the system. There are several small shielding signatures blocking our FDL scans, one in orbit, which seems to be a small station, and 3 on the planet, assessed to be likely locations from major settlements. There are no weapons outside the shield bubbles, but there may be some under them, said the sensor officer eagerly. The fleet leader wasn't the only one excited. Queequeg nodded to Zeven, which was the signal to begin transmitting the customary short pre-battle speech. "To all ships of the 4th Expansion Fleet, it seems we have found another world to conquer for the Dominion." Not only that, but it was called an independent colony, and colonies have to have a home world to come from. There is glorious battle ahead, I'm sure of it. "For the Dominion, Fleet Leader Desenquout," Queequeg said, in the most inspiring voice he could muster. The information wasn't new. Most of the officers and crew of his fleet had already deduced as much, as he had said. Still, it was important to pump up the troops before going to battle. "Zeven, order the fleet to form up in Aggressor Formation 1 and plot a least time course to this Hannes world," Queequeg said. This was always the best part, besides the actual fighting, of course. Making the enemy sweat always made him happy. He imagined the panic and fear of the crew operating that tiny station, and of the thousands or millions of being on the surface of that world. After waiting the appropriate amount of time, he spoke to Zeven once more. "Record and send what I'm about to say to the planet and station. No video," said Queequeg, smiling. Zeven nodded and tapped his console a few times, activating the translation program, which would send this broadcast in English. "To the inhabitants of Hannes world, you are now under the protection of the Disecri Dominion. Lower your shields, disarm your weapons, and prepare to receive peacekeeping forces. Failure to comply will result in unfortunate collateral damage to population and industrial centers. You have 1 hour 10 minutes to reply. January 24th, 2904, Landing City, Independent Colony of Hannes World. You have 1 hour 10 minutes to reply." Matthew was about 5 seconds from shitting his pants and curling into the fetal position. Of course, that was the mindset of just about every person in the Hannes World Colonial Militia at the moment. He clutched his grandfather's SAW-77 tightly, as if his life depended on it. It probably did. There was no chance the shield was holding for more than a few minutes, at most, before the kind of firepower that fleet had overloaded it. Hopefully, they wouldn't just get bombarded from orbit. He hoped he would have at least some chance to fight back before he died if they landed troops. Turning his attention back to the screen, he watched. "This is Mary Jameson, Governor of Hannes World. We will not surrender our freedoms so easily. Our answer is no." The governor looked as calm as ever. Matthew searched for some sign that she might be stressed or afraid in any way, only to find nothing. He wished he could act like that with this kind of threat coming straight for him. Still shaking slightly, he looked at the men and women around him. He didn't really know any of them. He had been ordered to find the nearest civilian shelter and man the guard post. And he had been in middle of the city instead of the outskirts where he normally was. Most of the people in the room mirrored his own fear. Although one guy seemed calm and assured, at least on the outside. He was probably ex-military. He had an Odin 3 combat shotgun. Those were last generation military issue for the Confederate Marines. He tried to shake the feeling that all of these people with him were about to die. Shaking with fear, Matthew awaited the inevitable. Hopefully his parents would be okay. January 24th, 2904, Hannah's World Station. Death was coming for Michael. The hostile fleet had already deployed recessed weapons and powered their shields. They had even pulled their transport ships out from under the protection of their screen. That would have been stupid in the face of another fleet, but his tiny station wouldn't be able to do more than pop a few landing pods before they destroyed it. He watched as the distance between them closed. Suddenly, the leading enemy ships opened fire, not with kinetics, which would be nearly useless as this range, and with only the first few ships firing, but with what seemed to be particle beams. Almost all of the beams were perfectly on target, despite his station's admittedly slow jinking. He watched as his shields depleted by about 2% every second. "Everybody, get to escape pods," he shouted, leaping out of his chair. All of his crew did the same, and they piled into the 2 escape pods accessible from the station's command deck. They launched. A few seconds later, the enemy ships stopped firing. The station was gone. The enemy ships fired just twice more in quick succession, and then settled into orbit over Hannah's world and began firing their beams at the shielded areas below. January 24th, 2904, Landing City. Independent colony of Hannah's world. Matthew saw the explosions in space. A new Michael station had been destroyed. Almost immediately afterwards, his view of the sky was obscured by the flaring light of stressed energy shields. The shields quickly began to suffer spot failures, and as a result several beams impacted the city, destroying some buildings and setting fire to others. Mere minutes after the barrage began, the shield went down, but the ships didn't stop firing for several minutes after that. When they did, Matthew looked up. The sky was covered in shuttles and streaking fires that could only be drop pods. They were coming. Matthew clutched his SA-77 even tighter and waited. Here we go.